If you're in the market for a mid-size SUV today, there are 1,000 of options for you to choose from. But in this video, I want to compare two that kind of sits in the different end of the spectrum when it comes to design, and that is the Volkswagen Tiguan compared to the Kia Sportage. Let you know what I think about this design, these two designs here, and then let you know which one I would pick based mainly on the design. But before we jump into the design, let's talk about some of the spec and tech here of these two mid-size SUVs. Both start at around $27,000 and go up to $37,000 depending on what trim level you choose. They both come in all-wheel drive or front-wheel drive only. However, on the performance part, the 2023 Sportage has a bit of an advantage because you have two different engine options. You have the 2.5-liter four-cylinder engine with 187 horsepower, and you also have a hybrid engine with 226 horsepower. And compare this to the Tiguan that only has 184 horsepower from its 2-liter four-cylinder engine. And you might think if you have more power, that's great, but it's gonna mess up the fuel economy, and that's not the case because the Kia Sportage has an estimated fuel economy of up to 28 combined mpg, and that's not even for the hybrid. The hybrid gets up to 39 mpgs, and compare this to the Tiguan that has an estimated fuel economy of 26 combined mpg. And in addition to this, the Sportage also got a lot bigger for this generation, and that means that you have a lot more storage space, and it beats out the Tiguan here as well with a class-leading 39.6 cubic feet of luggage space in the rear. Now, one thing that's pretty important when it comes to buying new car is the interior, because that's where you're gonna spend the most time. You're not gonna look at the exterior too much, you're gonna be inside driving the car, and this is where I'm a little bit torn between these two, because the 2023 Sportage has a very high-tech and sophisticated interior with this big panoramic curved display that houses two different displays, and they're both the same size, 12.3 inches for the gauge cluster and 12.3 inches for the infotainment system in this one big glass panel, which looks pretty cool. But as you know, I'm not a huge fan of having these big panels on the dash. However, in this case, in the Sportage, we're gonna have a look and compare the interiors. I actually think it looks pretty good in this specific model. Comparing this to the Tiguan, it only offers a 10.3-inch infotainment screen, but it has the nice housing for the gauge cluster, which I prefer. Imagine being able to sketch anything you want with pen and paper and get the proportions and perspective right every single time. That's what I teach my students inside my online course, Analog Designer Pro Pack. You learn everything from what basic tools to use in your sketching, how to get the perspective right using my unique cloud sketching technique, and how to nail the proportions of your car and product sketches by implementing something I call the box sliding technique. These classes have helped thousands of students all over the world quickly improve their sketching, and once you go through the course and actually take it step by step, you'll be able to see your own sketching skills shoot up to a new level. So click the link in the description or go to analogdesignerpropack.com to see everything you get access to inside, and check out the results my students are getting by implementing these techniques. And as a bonus, I'll even walk you through my two portfolios that got me into a master's degree in automotive design in Italy and also landed my first job as a designer. It's priceless if you're looking to become a professional designer. So click the link below or go to analogdesignerpropack.com today to learn more. I'll see you on the inside. So let's jump into Photoshop here. Let's have a look at these two cars. I think these are definitely in two completely different ends of the spectrum in styling. So the Germans up here, typical German design, very restrained and dialed back. We have a nice front fascia that is unmistakably Volkswagen, and you have this same kind of graphics for the past 20 years. Not a lot has changed, and when I was in design school and doing projects with Volkswagen and their design team, they had one rule, and that was every single feature, graphic feature, every single line on a Volkswagen needs to have a purpose, or you don't add it to it, which is funny because that's completely different from the way Kia approaches design. You can see that this is a very cool, very innovative, unique looking front end. I love these boomerang LEDs, daytime running lights that we have here, creating a very strong identity for the Kia. And you know, the tiger nose is still here, but it's not as clear as it's been before. We have the Tiger nose right here with this little dip up here, and then we have the dip in the or upswing in the bottom, creating the Tiger nose in the front end of the Kia. But now, instead of just making up the grille, the Tiger nose now has stretched and makes up pretty much the entire front end of the Kia. So you have the daytime running lights right here, and then you have the headlights in sort of in the bumper. I would call this a bumper headlight, with the main lights being positioned to down in this location. Now, looking at the side view, I think this is where it becomes even more apparent that the Germans are really keeping it straight to the point. Look at this gorgeous shoulder line, which is very pronounced in the Tiguan. It kind of ends right here and then comes back in the bottom and connects somewhat to the taillight graphics, because we have a separation in the taillight graphic here, and this connects then to this line, and then the top shoulder line connects into the front headlight, this section here. And I think this is a clean design. It reminds me a little bit of the Mercedes GLE proportions, which is some of the best SUV proportions I've ever seen, and this looks solid. I think the wheels of this sport trim really helps that a lot. Sport trim also comes with this chrome trim piece that goes from the lower part of the midsection and then wraps around in the rear bumper as well. It has this typical SUV box design. We have one big box for the greenhouse and the entire body, and then we have one box for the front end as well. Not a lot of curvature connecting these two, pretty much straight horizontal lines all the way. Very, very German. Now, looking at the Sportage down here, I really like what Kia is doing at the moment. They seem to have a lot of fun in their design department, creating some new unique features. And we also have the greenhouse looking completely different, with this black piece here for the D-pillar being blacked out, creating almost like a floating upper section of the greenhouse. This roof looks like it's sitting almost floating on top of the car, which looks very interesting and unique. You don't really have a clear shoulder. You have this shoulder here, kind of fades into the bottom and creates this muscle over the rear end, which I really like. It feels a lot more organic than the almost clinical Tiguan. Still has a very nice stance. However, I'm not a huge fan of these specific wheels. If I were to get this Sportage, I would definitely switch out those wheels. Probably the first thing I would do, in addition to another thing that happens in the rear end that we're gonna have a look at right now. One thing I really love about the rear end of the Tiguan are the chamfers. The Tiguan has some beautiful chamfers going on in the rear end that connects to the graphic features. For example, we have this shoulder line that wraps around this corner at this point, and then kind of creates this nice chamfer for the top part of the taillight. I think this is a beautiful little touch by having this shoulder line not connect to the corner of the taillight, creating almost a house, a roof for the main graphic feature in the rear, which is the taillight. And then you have these integrations, the internal parts, LEDs of the taillight, also connecting to this nice chamfer that goes down into the bumper. Very clean, and this chamfer here, this is also very typical Volkswagen design, something that they have in a bunch of different models. And we also have this line in the middle connecting kind of the LED. You could imagine it being a light bar between these two graphic features, the taillights in the middle, but instead they just decided to add a kind of crease in the trunk to visualize that. Down at the bottom, super simplistic and clean, stylish, elegant looking diffuser with the quad exhaust. Not sure if these are functional. If you have a 2-liter 184 horsepower, you don't really maybe need quad exhausts. I don't think these might even be fake. I'm not sure. Audi is making a lot of fake vents these days, so I'm not surprised if Tiguan jumps on that train as well. Just look at the SQ5, for example, with this really weird looking fake vents at the bottom. I would assume these are probably fake as well, but still looks pretty good because we have this chrome trim piece kind of connecting to the chrome pieces in the bottom. And we have this spoiler up top, which creates this beautiful, nice send-off looking at it from a side view. Pretty clean design on the Tiguan all around. It's, as I said, it's very, very German. What I can't understand, I think it looks good. I think it has a nice flow to it, but I can't find any line flow in this design. So it's an interesting approach. I don't think I've ever seen a car that feels like it has a nice flow to it, but none of the lines really connect. So you have this line not really connecting to anything here. You have this shoulder line that kind of fades in these areas, not connecting to anything, any graphic feature in the rear end. You have this shoulder line, same thing here with the muscle going over the rear axle, also just disappearing into this ocean in the middle of the car, and not a lot of connections between these lines that we have all over the body, but at the same time, it creates an interesting, nice flow. And this is a typical Kia graphic feature as well, to have these silver pieces in somewhere in around the C pillar or D pillar. Happens on pretty much every new Kia. Now, one thing that I would definitely do if I was to buy this Sportage is, you see this piece, the diffuser. I'm not a fan of this diffuser island down here. What I mean by diffuser island is almost like a body colored section, but this in this case it's silver. Very stark contrast to the rest of the diffuser. Doesn't have a connection to the body color anywhere. It just sits alone down here in a different color, and it makes it look weak in the rear end. So what I would do is to just make this black, and I think that looks so much better, and it doesn't have this island feel to it now. It actually feels like it's part of the lower part of the diffuser, having it black and not stick out so much with such a high contrast color. Last but not least, let's have a look at these interiors. And I think this philosophy of having super strict, clinical almost lines of the Tiguan kind of morphs into the interior as well. It still looks very nice in here. This is an interior that I would love to sit in for a very long time, and I like the way both screens are integrated here. This has a clear housing for the infotainment system. It's not just an iPad that is stuck on top of here, and you also have a digital gauge cluster with a proper integration in the dash with this house and roof over it, creating a very cozy position for the gauge cluster and not have any glare or something like that. It sits deep in the dash. That's what I want for the gauge cluster. On top of that, we have a sporty steering wheel, 3-spoke steering wheel with even a flat bottom. It looks like it sort of flattens out a little bit at least. And overall, the materials in here just feel premium. It feels like a very high-end interior. Looking at the lines, the horizontal lines, and also the materials used in the interior. So looking at the Kia Sportage here, I said that I think, I'm not a huge fan of iPads sticking on like this. Specifically, when I have a big screen that curved like this with both the infotainment 12.3 inches and the 12.3 inch gauge cluster here. But in this case, I really think it works in the Sportage. I'm not sure exactly why. I think it has to do with the positioning and also that it doesn't stick up into the visibility of the windshield when you're driving it. I don't want to have a screen that sticks above the horizon line for the hood, for example. This sits further down, and I think that actually works to have this big panoramic curved screen with both of these screens in it. It still has a lot more styling in it than we have in the Tiguan. For example, just look at these stylized air vents, which I think is good because styling creates some identity for the cars. If you reduce styling, if you want to go too minimalist, you're gonna lose identity as well. And I think Kia is doing a great job both hammering in their identity both in the interior and the exterior while still keeping it pretty clean and classy. It doesn't feel overstyled, even though it's a lot of styling going on in here. So which one would I choose? Would I choose the clinical, very German, serious looking Tiguan, or would I prefer to buy this Kia Sportage, the new 2023 model? For me, I'm gonna have to go with the Kia Sportage, not just because I like the design. I would make the rear end black, the lower part, as I said. I would also switch out the wheels, and we would have a very, very cool looking mid-size SUV if we did those small changes to the Sportage. But I think if we put some cool wheels onto the Tiguan, that would also look great. But in this case, I think the fun, excitement that you feel from the design of the Kia Sportage, that's what's gonna tip me over to buying the Sportage over the Tiguan.